Have you ever um, stopped working toward a really big goal or maybe had a major project finally wrap up and then suddenly felt uh, completely blank? Like your identity was, I don't know, a whiteboard someone just wiped clean.
Yeah.
And you're just standing there thinking, what am I supposed to write on it now?
Yeah, that's a really specific feeling.
It really is, isn't it? It's not like a huge dramatic sadness usually, more like a quiet, kind of unsettling emptiness.
Definitely.
So if you ever grappled with that thought, I don't know who I am without my goals, then this deep dive is definitely for you.
Absolutely.
I know so many of us think of ourselves as like a motivated person, right? A go-getter, someone who always needs something next, something to aim for.
Yeah, that drive.
And when that something isn't there, maybe the finish line passed or the next one hasn't even showed up yet, it can honestly feel like you're just spiraling a bit.
It really can.
But what is actually underneath all that drive, that relentless feeling? Why do we feel this way when things just idle?
It's such a common feeling, even if we don't often talk about it, you know? The research you sent over, especially around achievement psychology, it really brings this out.
Yeah.
And it makes you ask some pretty deep questions, doesn't it? Like, do you genuinely love the grind, the hustle? Or is it maybe just serving as a really effective distraction?
A distraction from what, though?
Well, from feelings maybe you don't really want to deal with, things you'd rather just sort of push aside by staying busy.
Okay.
And another core question that kept popping up in the notes and the articles was, if you don't have that list of things to achieve, that next step, do you even know how to define yourself?
Oof. Yeah.
And look, this isn't about judging anyone, obviously. It's about, honest introspection. Are you doing all this because you truly love the process, the work itself? Or is there this kind of underlying fear that you'll just fall apart? That your whole sense of self might just dissolve if you actually stop moving?
Right. And that's exactly where that, mild identity crisis can hit you, often totally out of the blue.
Yeah, unexpectedly.
It happens when routines get shaken up, or like we said, that massive project you poured everything into for months, maybe years, finally ends. Or maybe plans just fall through. Suddenly, all that external structure, the constant doing, it just vanishes. And you're left with this silence, which feels really loud, actually.
Loud silence, yeah.
And that silence forces you to ask pretty directly,
Oh.
okay, who am I when I'm not proving something?
Exactly.
When you strip away the achievements, the future goals, all the roles you play for those goals, what's actually left? That's the really uncomfortable, but I guess essential core of it.
Precisely. One of the behavioral psychology pieces you found called it the post-achievement void, which sounds dramatic, but it's surprisingly common.
Post-achievement void.
Yeah. We tend to imagine finishing a huge goal, getting the promotion, launching the thing, finishing the degree as this moment of just pure triumph,
Celebration.
Right. Confetti, champagne. Exactly. But often what actually follows isn't just that fanfare or pure joy. A lot of people feel this weird sense of deflation, even a kind of quiet sadness.
Oh, it's so true. It's like you climb the mountain, get to the top, look around, and then you're like, wait, this is it. And then comes that slightly unsettling realization, oh, okay, maybe I wasn't doing it just for the outcome.
Right.
Maybe I was doing it at least partly, so I didn't have to just sit with myself, didn't have to face that inner quiet. That's a really powerful thing to admit.
That's a huge insight, because when the external world, the striving, the next thing on the list goes quiet, our internal world suddenly gets really loud.
Yeah.
It's like all that background noise of performing and getting validated fades out, and you're just left with, well, your own thoughts, your unprocessed feelings, your hidden insecurities.
Yeah, the stuff you were keeping busy to avoid.
Yeah, exactly. And that can be incredibly jarring, maybe even scary, if you've really built your identity around always moving forward. The research suggests that for many, this quiet isn't peaceful at all. It's more like a cacophony of things you've been pushing down.
Okay, so let's dig into that a bit more. What do the sources say about why goals do this for us? I mean, beyond just accomplishing something cool, what deeper need are they meeting that makes their absence feel so empty?
That's a really fundamental question, and the research points to a few really powerful functions, almost primal ones, that goals serve.
Okay.
First off, they give us immense structure. Think about it like scaffolding for your day, your week, your life. They organize your time, your energy, what you decide to do.
Right, like guardrails.
Exactly. Without that structure, it's easy to feel lost, just sort of adrift. Secondly, and this is maybe more subtle, they make us feel safe.
Safe. How so?
Well, having a clear path, a defined objective, it reduces uncertainty. And our brains are basically wired to hate uncertainty, to seek out predictability. Evolutionarily speaking, ambiguity often meant danger.
Ah, okay, that makes sense.
So goals act like this psychological safety net. They give you a sense of control, predictability in a world that often feels anything but predictable.
Got it. Structure and safety. What else?
And then there's the third big one, which is exactly what you were hinting at earlier. Goals are incredibly effective distractions.
Right. The busyness.
Yes. They divert our focus away from self-doubt, from maybe bigger existential questions, from the often uncomfortable feeling of just being without an obvious external purpose.
So if you're always busy, always chasing.
You don't have time or mental space to ask those deeper, sometimes unsettling questions about, am I enough? Or what's this all for? And this is crucial from the materials when you rely on goals too much for these things.
When they become the only thing.
Exactly. You inadvertently leave very little room for your actual identity to just emerge, or for genuine curiosity about who you are besides what you achieve, or even just for the simple, profound experience of existing, just for its own sake.
Wow. So the constant push can actually shrink the space for knowing yourself.
Ironically, yes. It narrows your focus onto external achievement.
So it sounds like it's less about goals being inherently bad and more about our relationship with them, like becoming too dependent on them for our sense of self or security.
That's a great way to put it. It's the over-reliance. And that leads right into what one of the articles called the quiet revolution, this idea of just being.
Just being. Without performing, without progressing.
Exactly. And let me tell you, as the sources really drive home, that is so much harder than it sounds.
Oh, I bet.
It requires, a fundamental rewiring of how we think about our time, our value, even how we define success itself.
Because everything pushes us to do more.
It really does. One of the leadership experts cited in your packet made that point strongly. Our modern society, especially here in the West, is so biased towards doing over being.
Yeah, productivity is king.
Totally. You get praised for being busy, for having a packed schedule, for visible accomplishments. So when you consciously try to step off that treadmill, even just for a bit, there's often this deep internal resistance. It goes against years, maybe decades of conditioning. That fear of stagnating or feeling like you're falling behind.
Or even just having nothing impressive to say at parties.
Right. It sounds trivial, but it's real. That fear of having nothing new to report can be incredibly powerful. It's not just some abstract idea. It's a deeply ingrained habit.
Gosh, yeah. I think so many of us are trying to, teach ourselves that being in a slower season doesn't mean you're failing. Or that you're somehow less valuable.
It's a constant relearning process.
Because, at the end of the day, you're not a machine, right? You're not just processing inputs and churning out outputs 24/7.
No.
You're not a brand that needs constant curation for likes and validation. You're a person.
Yeah.
A human being.
Yeah.
Biological, emotional, with rhythms, peaks and valleys. And people go through phases. Some are fast, some are slow, some are just confusing as hell.
Mm-hmm.
You don't always have to be in go mode. Mm-hmm. It's actually essential to ebb and flow.
Yeah. To
have times of intense focus, sure, but also times of quiet reflection. We're just existing.
And honestly, if you take that longer term view, some of the philosophical texts you looked at encourage.
Yeah.
You really don't want to get to the end and look back and realize you spent your entire life just chasing stuff, moving from goal to goal, always looking for the next external validation.
But never actually lived.
Exactly. Never really savored the small things or understood who you are outside of what you do or built those deep connections that aren't just about your productivity.
That really hits home.
It raises a pretty critical question for all of us, doesn't it? What kind of life story do you actually want to write? One defined just by a list of achievements, or one that reflects a life lived deeply, authentic?
With all this messy, unlistable glory.
Precisely. It's finding that balance, that profound balance between the striving and the simply being.
That idea of a life deeply and authentically lived.
Yeah, that resonates. So, okay, bringing this back to the listener, to you navigating your own path right now. Mm-hmm. What does this all mean? Mm-hmm. It leads to some really potent questions for reflection, ones the materials really push us towards, like, what if you're actually allowed to rest without that horrible gnawing guilt?
Just imagine that for a second.
Seriously. A deep breath, a quiet moment, purely for restoration. No inner critic whispering about what you should be doing instead.
And building right on that what if you're enough. Just fundamentally, inherently enough. Even the days you do absolutely nothing worth posting.
Ooh, yeah. Nothing that gets external praise or clicks or likes.
In this hyper-connected, perform all the time world we live in that feels like almost radical, doesn't it? A rebellious thought.
It really does. It pushes against so much of what society tells us.
Yeah.
And maybe the deepest one is, what if your actual worth isn't tied to how impressive your life looks to other people? Or even to that polished version you sometimes present to yourself? What if it's just there, inherent, unconditional?
Wow. These are not easy questions, especially when we spend so long looking outside for validation.
They're not easy at all. But what's really interesting here, and this came up in some of the mindfulness practices you looked into, is that even the act of healing itself, processing things, learning to sit with discomfort, just allowing yourself to be that can be a goal too.
But a different kind of goal.
Exactly. It's a quiet one. It's not about getting awards or likes. It's internal, deeply transformative.
So it's still progress, just inward progress.
You could see it that way. And if you connect that to the bigger picture, building a version of yourself that doesn't need constant productivity, that doesn't rely on the next big win, but instead relies on a deep internal sense of your own worth, your own presence. That might just be the most powerful, most lasting thing you ever actually build.
Wow. An inner foundation.
Right. Something resilient, something authentic that holds up no matter what's happening externally, whether there's a big goal on the horizon or not.
So maybe you don't know who you are without your goals right now. And perhaps, like the sources were suggesting, maybe that's the entire point of this season you might be in.
An invitation almost.
Yeah, an invitation, maybe a quiet challenge to figure out who you are without all that external pressure, without the constant grind, without that exhausting need to always be something impressive for everyone else, or even for yourself.
Just you.
Just you.
Maybe in sweatpants. Maybe with a cup of tea. Just trying to feel okay with simply being here. This feels like it might be the most profoundly important deep dive we can take, just figuring that out.